So our principal ingredients we have for thread making are, of course, good quality linen thread, single ply Z-twist, a mixture, in my case, of 2 parts beeswax, 1 part pine resin. There are more complicated shoemaker's wax recipes around. A blunt, smooth awl for smoothing the thread. The pig's bristles, which will become our needles. A fine point, which will become apparent later. A knife for general trimming of the bristles. And a smooth piece of wood for smoothing the bristle and thread braiding later on. A good benchmark when measuring out your thread is 4.5 times the length of the seam you're going to sew. From the tip of the fingers, roll down your leg, and as is often the case when I'm showing people, I often overshoot. Basically, the fibres will become parallel in the thread, and when that happens, they lose their grip on each other and the fibres pull apart, giving you that lovely long fine taper. The thread coming from the ball will now have a lot of extra twist in it from the unravelling, so you get rid of that. And then you stagger the fine points of each ply just a little bit, and then pull the plies through your hands so as to make sure it's all got an even tension, and then pinch above with your left thumb and forefinger and wipe downwards, separating out the finished plies, and unravel the next strand. This is where the quality of the linen is important, as in the length of the staple fibres in the thread dictate how long a taper you can get. This linen I'm using is around 40 years old. Wax the ends of your threads together and pull all the threads through your hand to make sure the tension is the same, and wax the other end. Hook the thread around a nail or a chair leg or a table leg and twist up the waxed part first until it's nice and round, and then let the twist continue down the thread all the way to the nail. And we're not twisting the very end of the taper at the moment. We want that to stay nice and flat for when we attach it to the bristle. Wrap the thread around your finger and do the same with the other end. Waxed part first, then letting the twist run down to the nail. I usually aim for about a 45-degree angle of twist.
Okay.
And seesaw it around the nail to make sure the twist is even all the way along the thread.
Great.
Now comes the fun part. You take your smooth blunt awl, wrap the thread once around it, and then very briskly move backwards and forwards up and down the thread. This part is in slow motion to show you the action. This will tear all the bits of fluff and stuff, here we are, full speed, off the thread, leaving a lovely, smooth, lump-free thread. And here is the fluff that I've just taken off. About to part company. Do that for the entire thread, including the bit behind the nail. Don't forget that part. Then get the shoemaker's wax and wax the entire thread also. If you like, you can get a piece of kangaroo hide, smooth side in, and vigorously rub the thread, melting the wax into it. Scanning the thread around my thumb and little finger. You choose which fingers you use based on the length of the thread for a large or small skein. When doing very fine sewing, I use some very small pig's bristles I've had for some years, but having said that, I've done everything up to shoe soles with those small bristles when I wasn't able to get the long pig's bristles I have now. Pig's bristles fray like human hair, so supporting the bristle, evenly peel apart the two halves, creating a fork about 1/3 of the length of the bristle. Cut the ends of the fork at 2 different lengths, and the root end of the bristle at an angle. Wax the fork, as well as about 1 or 2 centimeters below that of the bristle all the way around, making sure it's good and tacky. And now those beautiful long fine tapers that we left flat when we were spinning the rest of the thread come into play. Trap the fine tip of it in the fork of the bristle, pull it down about 1 centimetre, hold out at right angles, and wind it back over itself. This traps the end of the thread tightly down to the bristle. Make sure every winding is touching the one before it, and this will make a beautiful smooth progression all the way from just pure bristle up to the base of the fork. Separate the fork, stick the thread down to 1/2 of it, then wind it away from yourself, trap the other part of the fork, and then wind the main body of the bristle also away from yourself. Wind away, trap, wind away. And you keep doing this until you have approached close to the end of the fork. Make sure you have the twist in the rest of the thread. Take your fine point, poke it through the thread, and take the tip of the bristle and put it through the hole. Pinching it at the crossover point for some reason makes it slide through more easily. Roll the finished thread and bristle under a piece of wood to give it a smooth finish. Here we have the beveled tip of the bristle. Down to the pure binding of the bristle. You see how smooth a transition that is. And into the fork braid part of the thread binding, the lock, and then pure thread. So here we have the comparison between the thread on its own and the bristle thread combination. The differences between the two get greater the heavier the thread that you make. So you can have a very heavy thread and still the bristle will be the same amount of bulk.